So I wanted to make a video about fall tomatoes here in Central Florida. In central, southern Florida, most of Florida, we can do 2 crops of tomatoes a year. We can do a crop in the spring and a crop in the fall. Now, in the springtime, there's some differences between growing tomatoes in the spring and in the fall, beyond obviously the time of year, that the actual planting date. In Florida, it is now Central Florida. I live in Riverview, Zone 9B. It is September the 6th. So it's, for all intents and purposes, it's summer still. We are still fully summer weather pattern right now. The only fall weather condition that we're getting, or environmental condition we're getting right now, is shorter day lengths. So the day lengths are getting shorter very quickly, which the temperature goes down slightly. But we've had, this is just this week, that rain gauge is woefully inaccurate. We're probably at like 3.5 inches of rainfall this week, and it's over 90 degrees right now. So it's summertime still. So the weather is still really hot, really humid, and it's raining a lot. So when you plant tomatoes in the fall, you're starting in that hot, humid, summertime type weather, and you're going to end in cool November, early December weather. Whereas, and then in your spring crop, you're going to be starting out in the coldest February, February, Valentine's Day time, and then you're going to end in the beginning of May. So that's kind of, so you end with this, you start with cool and damp, and you end up with super hot and dry. And your fall crop starts with really hot and wet and ends up cool and dry. So you end up kind of opposite, right? So what's really important with your fall crop of tomatoes is to get them in the ground, get them in at the right time. It's hard to start. If you start October the 1st, you're probably not going to get a good crop of like your indeterminate type tomatoes. Now, if you live close to the coast, you can do that, because you're not going to get nights in the 50s until, like, if it gets 55 degrees here in Riverview, in Pinellas County, it's probably going to be 60 something. So you have much more, they're really zone 10, and you can kind of go all through the winter. But there's a lot of Central Florida that's firmly in the 9A, 9B zone. And if you start October 1st, by Christmas time, we regularly get some pretty cold nights that are we'll get some damp and cold, which is not good for your tomatoes. They don't like the soil temperature to get cold. The air temperature is less important, I've found. They can take fluctuations in that, but if the soil temperature gets cool, they don't like it. So in my opinion, in my experience, I've gotten good tomatoes starting in October the 1st. But if I start a little bit earlier, I'm not going to have that issue. But the issue you have right now, again, it's September the 6th, is the disease pressure is as high as it gets right now. I mean, this is the peak time for insects and every different kind of fungus. It's well over 90 degrees every day. It's raining almost every day, and it's very humid. The low temperatures doesn't even get below 70 or 80 degrees at night. So the tomatoes are not going to fruit right now, but they can vegetatively grow really vigorously right now. So that being said, your fall crop of tomatoes, go with something that is disease resistant, has a really good disease resistance. I generally do that anyway, but you can get away with some of the more heirlooms in the spring easier than you can in the fall. So one of the worst pests that we, disease pressure issues that we have, particularly with fall, is all the insect vectored diseases, and that's your um, mosaic viruses and also the excuse me, tomato yellow leaf curl virus. The tomato yellow leaf curl is a scourge on our tomatoes here. It's a bad deal, and it's relatively recently become a problem. But it's vectored by whiteflies, and there's also other. Most of the viral diseases are vectored by insects, and right now your fall crop is going to have your insect. The amount of insects is orders of magnitude higher than end of Valentine's Day coming out of winter. You just don't have that whitefly and the sap sucking insect pressure in the early spring that you do in the early fall. So, and the same thing with the mildews and molds and stuff like that are going to be really bad this time of year. So, but I feel confident that if I get a disease-resistant tomato, that I'm going to be able to go through that and have a good disease control program, especially early on, that come mid to late October, when the nights get, in the 60s and we're in 80 degrees in the day, my plant's going to be at maturity and it's going to be setting a lot of fruit, in October. So, like I said, right now what I've got planted is I'm going to have 4 tomato plants. Here I've got a red snapper. This is a purple boy. I'm going to do a sun sugar or sun gold up there, and I don't know what I'm going to do here yet. I'm going to pick maybe like a better boy or something. I don't know. I may do another determinate tomato up here. That better boy is not a determinate, but I'm going to do 2 determinants and 2 indeterminants. So the purple boy is a really good one, and the red snapper. The red snapper tomato, this tomato is probably the most disease-resistant tomato I've ever seen. I mean, they do outstanding. And the fruit are huge. They're like, big beefsteak sized tomatoes. And they're resistant tomato yellow leaf curl, the septoria leaf spot, all that stuff. They're very disease resistant, and they're a determinate tomato. Huge production I've gotten off this one. Same with the purple boy, is resistant to the, the gimbal's going a little weird there, to the leaf spot. It's not resistant to the yellow leaf curl, but it's just a really abundant producer, and it's a super vigorous plant. If you like the Cherokee Purple, which is my favorite tomato, this tomato is, in my opinion, tastes as good to me. Maybe not quite as good, but the production's 4 or 5 times higher than what you're going to get from a Cherokee Purple, at least. Super productive plant, really productive tomato. And they're a smaller tomato than a Cherokee Purple, but they're really, really good, and that plant is far more disease resistant and vigorous than a Cherokee Purple. The Sun Gold, Sun Sugar that I'm going to plant in this one, Sun Sugars are good. Most of your small cherry types are pretty resistant to disease, are more resistant than the larger fruited tomatoes, generally speaking, and they're more vigorous, and they'll kind of grow past. A lot of times they can be a little bit more susceptible to that early blight and the septoria leaf spot, but I still end up getting a good crop. But last year I had the yellow leaf curl on my cherry tomatoes, which was disappointing because it just stunted them out completely. And then, like I said, I'm going to do something in here that's kind of just an early season, just an early producing determinant, probably is what I'm going to do in there, just a slicer of some kind. But you'll notice I got all my tomatoes are in containers. I'll do another video on these containers, but if you're growing tomatoes, home gardening in Central Florida, grow it in a container. Just do it. These are sub-irrigated containers that I made from old molasses tubs. They're probably 15 to 20 gallons of soil in there, and they're sub-irrigated. And you add water through here, and you add, this is a PVC ring that's in the top with holes in it, and I put my liquid fertilizer in there, and it feeds it under the plastic mulch. The reflective mulch is something that the commercial growers do here in Florida. It's been shown to be effective at repelling whiteflies and any kind of insects that like to get on the underside of the leaves and feed on the sap sucking type insects, because that light reflecting on the bottom of the leaf kind of will confuse them. Not to mention it helps get a little bit extra light reflecting back on the plant, which is a good thing. But sub-irrigated container is absolutely 100% the way to go. If you just want to grow a few tomato plants, don't fool with putting them in the soil. The nematode pressure and the other soil-borne pathogens, I've tried it. If you have the sandy soil like Mayaca fine sand like we have here in Florida, it's so hard to grow good tomatoes in the ground. Particularly when the weather is warm, the nematodes are really bad right now. The spring crop, you might be able to get away with a little easier, but the fall, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. The nematode pressure is as high as it gets. But like I said, pick a disease-resistant tomato, grow in a sub-irrigated pot. Like these are earth boxes right here. My gimbal's going a little weird. There's 2 earth boxes that I have here. These I'm going to do squash in. I don't have the mulch on. I'm just getting them prepped and letting them sit out. And what I do to prep these pots, I grew tomatoes in them in the spring. At least 3 of them, I think. I had tomatoes in them in the spring. And what I do is I pull all the tomatoes out. I always all the roots out as I can get. I mix up the soil. I put a bunch of an organic fertilizer that has, microbial inoculants and stuff in it. Probably 2 or 3 cups into the container. And I will top it off with probably like 2 or 3 big shovelfuls of seagrass that's chopped up. And I'll mix that all in, and I'll let it just sit through the whole summer and get with the top open and just get rained on and just cook down. And then just before I plant, I mix in a nice helping of worm castings, maybe some perlite, something to make sure I stay with a good, fluffy mix. But I always put some worm castings in before I plant and then go right into it, and that works great. But honestly, the sub-irrigated containers with the liquid feeding system that I have set up here, and these trellises, everything goes together right. I just put these in the pot, just probably 30 minutes ago. Planted them in there, so I think they're going to take off. It was definitely time to get them in. But yeah, like I said, your fall tomatoes, go the disease-resistant crop, disease-resistant plant. And I grew these from my own seeds. That I got these seeds from Haas Tools. Haas Tools has a really outstanding selection of disease-resistant hybrid tomatoes. They're not GMO tomatoes. Hybrid tomatoes are controlled pollination between 2 different parents. They're not GMO seeds. Don't believe that. So go with a hybrid, disease-resistant hybrid. You're going to be, all you've ever grown is heirlooms here in Florida, you're going to be totally blown away if you grow one of these hybrids like this. And to me, the flavor is just as good. And I get at least 4 or 5 times the amount of tomatoes per plant than any of the heirlooms that I've grown, any of the large fruited, like the Cherokee Purples and the other beefsteaks, like the Mortgage Lifters and the other different types. These disease-resistant type hybrids, particularly the Red Snapper, is outstanding. I mean, just in the springtime, this thing just blew me away. I mean, there's probably like 40 tomatoes on each plant, and they were like, they were big. Some of them were huge, like well over a pound. So, they did really, really well, and they didn't lose any of their leaves the entire season. Not one leaf got crappy looking and fell off. They just did really good. But I use a product for disease control. I definitely recommend this product right here. It's the Monterey Complete Disease Control. It's a bacteria that they spray on the leaf that is a fungicide, a biofungicide. And I will do copper sometimes. I'll alternate between the two. I'd rather spray the Complete Disease Control, but the copper is a more efficient, you know what I mean? So what I'll do a lot of times, I'll spray that bacillus and I'll spray that mixed with a little neem oil, spray it, and then I'll alternate between the two. And every 2 weeks to 10 days, spray and feed. Don't overly feed them, just feed them a little bit at a time throughout the season, and you're going to be, but you got to be pretty aggressive with spray. In my experience, and it's worth it because I don't have to grow a bunch of plants. I can grow 3 or 4 plants, and I'll be giving away a ton of tomatoes, and I can focus my energy on those few plants and get really excellent production than growing a whole bunch of them, trying to, quality over quantity for home gardening is the way to go in my experience. So yeah, I'm going to be making some videos soon about these containers here, so you guys can get a update on that. So check it out.